and welcome back to Divine Healing on Demand. I'm super excited today to be with Lesley Rubinoff, the holistic bitch, and she today is going to be talking about the healing power of cannabis. I'm so excited to have you all here, and let's get to it. So, Lesley, I'm super excited to have you here to talk about cannabis and how we can utilize it to really heal our bodies. But I want to get some background information on you, where you're from, where did you all begin this journey, and how did you start on your holistic bitch journey?
Hi, friend. Well, I'm glad we're here, even amongst these technical difficulties. We got this, and we're here. So I always kind of had this interest in wellness and well-being, and I didn't really know what holistic was, but from a young age, I decided to go plant-based when I was 12. And just all along within my life, there were just things like I hated toothpaste and I didn't like air fresheners and I didn't like a lot of stuff that was normal to a lot of people made me feel funny. And after I had a brief stint in public relations, I was like, this isn't what I want to do. I want to go back to school. And I enrolled at the Institute of Holistic Nutrition in Toronto. It was in class, it was intensive. And I just blew through the course. It was really easy for me. I graduated as the valedictorian. I graduated with the highest marks and yada yada yada. And it was just like second nature to me. It was so easy. It was never something that became stressful where other people struggled in the course with it being, challenging. For me, it was easy. It was like this embedded wisdom that I've had and brought to this life. So, yeah, that's kind of where it started.
So it was like destined for you. Like you were just really attuned to all these things that a lot of people have to bring into their awareness. Air fresheners bad, and things like that. I love that. So I really want to ask you specifically, like, when did you realize that cannabis had healing powers, and how did you decide to incorporate that into your healing business?
So, the truth of the matter was is that when I was, younger, cannabis, smoking weed was like a big part of my life. It was a social thing. I wasn't a drinker, I was a pot smoker. And it was just something that was always present in my life, not really understanding, you know, how cannabis works in the system, what are the best ways to consume it, do you always have to get high consuming it? And when I built my community online, and what happened was is people were starting to come to me and say, "Hey, you know, whose CBD do you buy?" And at the time I was just like, "What? I don't even know what that is. Like, I have no clue." And this was years ago. This is probably almost, I don't know, 8 years ago. And I was like, I don't know. And then I immersed myself and I was like, okay, there's a desire, a want, a need for this. I need to start figuring this out. So I started learning. I started learning about, we have a system in our body called the endocannabinoid system, and the system is literally designed to bring the body into homeostasis. And I always tell people, like, if you look at an airplane, there's all these gauges, right? And those gauges tell the operator what to do. And the endocannabinoid system is exactly that in the human body. And the interesting thing is that it was only really discovered um, in the early 90s, when the scientists started digging into it, um, which I think is really interesting because we never really, obviously, no one ever really talked about that, right? So as they discovered the endocannabinoid system, they started looking into, and they were seeing that there are, two main receptors that make up the main part of the human endocannabinoid system, called the CB1 and the CB2. And the CB1 is the receptors in your body that are going to, target your appetite, your immune cells, your motor activity, your pain perception, short-term memory, your thinking, your thoughts, Whereas the CB2 receptors are, the adipose tissues, our bone, our cardiovascular system, the central nervous system, our eyes, our gut, the immune system, our organs, the kidney, the liver, pancreas, the reproductive system, the respiratory tract, our skeletal muscles, our skin. So they quickly realized that this is one of the largest systems in the body, yet nobody knows what it is or how it works or how it interacts. And that, I think, is what really interests me. So I started learning about that, and I started educating people about that. I took courses and I started learning how it works in the body. And when it came time for the product, I was at the time selling another company's product, and I was like, no way, like I could do this better. I could figure this out in such a different way. I could do this better. I could, give the consumer the experience that they need while educating them and making sure they have a top tier product.
Wow, that's so amazing, Lesley. That is just so moving, and I love hearing about your story. And I want to ask you the thing that everyone's worried about, right? Like, why do you think there's such a stigma around cannabis?
Because cannabis has always been, like that hippy dippy thing. You're a stoner, you're this, you're going to get high, you're going to burn out your brain cells. And listen, I think there's a certain, first of all, understanding that in order to consume plant medicine doesn't mean that you need the psychoactive component of that plant, which for people worried about getting stoned or high, the psychoactive component is THC. THC is one of, there's probably about 130 different cannabinoids studied right now. Okay. So that's the only one that has psychoactive properties, number one. But there's CBD, there's CBN, there's CBG, there's so many different cannabinoids that all work in different ways in the body that don't affect the psychoactivity. There's no, you're not getting stoned. And what people also don't understand is that we have, so cannabis, which comes from, you can get cannabis from a marijuana plant, and you can get cannabis from a hemp plant. And now you'll hear people say, oh, hemp's not effective, it doesn't do anything. And I'm like, I will put millions of dollars that you're wrong, because when you look at the botany of both of these plants, marijuana plants grow higher levels of THC, lower levels of other cannabinoids, whereas hemp, it's the opposite. They grow higher in other cannabinoids, and less than 3% is THC. I mean, now everybody's crossbreeding and they're growing and they're doing and they're creating whatever they want. But if you extract cannabinoids from a hemp plant, and you extract cannabinoids from a marijuana plant, and you put them under a microscope, you are not going to be able to tell if did that CBD come from a marijuana plant or did it come from a hemp plant. It's a cannabinoid. So that's the stigma. And of course, big pharma shuts down one of the most powerful medications in the world for their own benefits and gains of wins of making people sick. And if we look to the amount of plants that we have in this world, including mushrooms and cannabis and all kinds of plant medicine, herbs, we could heal the entire world. And pharmaceuticals, all pharmaceuticals stem from plants, So it's like the biggest one that like often comes up, well, what do we do about Tylenol? Like Tylenol, that like totally hits the liver. You deplete your L-glutathione levels. You're giving it to kids when they have a fever. I'm like, white willow bark. Like that's where Tylenol comes from. That's the effective component of Tylenol. Just use that. So I know I digressed a bit from this your question about the stigma, but the stigma is coming from, fear mongering, fear psychosis. It's coming from a place that was driven to drive a negative message on a positive plant, and then it comes confusion.
Yeah, and another thing I heard you say is the fact that we almost validate medicine more than we do the plants that they even came from in the first place. And it's sad that a lot of people don't even recognize that a lot of the medications that they're taking actually there's a plant there's a plant product that they could use instead of that. And I think it's because of what we're fed, the commercials and all of that. So I really loved your share about that. And so I wanted to ask you, why should people consider using cannabis or consider cannabis when inquiring for health solutions?
Well, the first thing is that every single living species with a backbone has an endocannabinoid system. So we need that system brings the body into balance. And there's a lot of studies that suggest endocannabinoid deficiency is linked to things like fibromyalgia, anxiety, depression, and gut health, and this, and hormones, and bad periods, and endometriosis, and so forth. And is it the only contributing factor? No. But is it a big missing piece to a lot of puzzles? I think so, because I've seen it. And people are also under the impression that, CBD is just for pain. It's just for inflammation, but it's not. It's for over the last 5 years that I've created this company, the amount of emails and the testimony, I was able to get off my diabetic medication. I was able to get off my blood pressure medication. I was able to get off my antidepressants, my anti-anxiety meds. I was able to have a normal period without the cramps, without the pain. My fibroid shrunk. My child has juvenile arthritis, could go out and play. I'm sleeping. So there's so many things that cannabis is so beneficial for, but it comes to the underwhelming amount of education.
Yeah. Oh, I love, love, love that. That is so, thank you for all of your work that you do to bring this information to us and help us understand. If you can you kind of explain in more detail how the endocannabinol system works for some of us who may not quite understand so that we can have an in depth understanding?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm trying to think about the easiest way to explain this. The endocannabinoid system, like I said before, is a system that is based on vast, like, spread throughout the body. But what happens is that endocannabinoids, they bind to either receptors. And that is the result, depending on where those receptors are located and which endocannabinoid it binds to. So if we look at endocannabinoids that might target, let's say, the CB1 receptors, okay? So a spine nerve to relieve pain, for instance, okay? So that endocannabinoid that goes into the system, and then it says, okay, it's very, very smart. It says, okay, there's pain here, there's inflammation here. We need to we have to fuel the endocannabinoid system, and right away that's going to happen. It's going to activate the endocannabinoid system, and then it starts to bring down the pain, or it starts to release that anxiety, right? So there's three main components. So there's the endocannabinoid, it's the endocannabinoids, the receptors, and the enzymes. Okay, so the endocannabinoids, also called endogenous cannabinoids, they're molecules that our body makes. Okay, and they're similar to cannabinoids, but they're produced by our own body. But in order to have that production consistent and relative, we have to be fueling ourselves properly. We have to be removing the toxins from our body. So it gets really sciencey, but like there's two key endocannabinoids that they know of. One's called an AEA and the other one's called a 2AG. Okay. They keep our internal functions running smoothly. Okay. So your body produces them as we need them. And it makes it really difficult to know what our typical levels are, because the endocannabinoid system is really still so new. Okay. Then we talked about the other receptors that are found throughout the body. Those two main ones are the CB1. Again, those are mostly found in the central nervous system, and then the CB2, which are mostly found in our peripheral nervous system, especially our immune cells. Okay. And if you look at a lot of studies that came out actually in Canada, the universities were studying that with a fueled endocannabinoid system, it was actually blocking the COVID SARS-2 infection from entering the cells. But we'll touch on that because that's more to do with actually the terpenes. So I'll talk about that in a second. But endocannabinoids bind to either receptors, and the effects and results depend on where the receptor is located in which endocannabinoid it kind of binds to. So, endocannabinoids might target CB1 receptors, like I said, in that spinal nerve to relieve pain. And then others might bind to that CB2 receptor in your immune cells to signal that your body's experiencing inflammation, which is obviously a common sign of, any autoimmune disease or any immune function. And then the last kind of part is these enzymes that are responsible for breaking down the endocannabinoids once they're carried out their function. So, like I said to you, the two main enzymes are responsible for this is a fatty acid, okay, which breaks down that AEA, and then another one, which is another type of fat, which typically breaks down the 2-AG. So it gets a little sciencey, but there's so many different, like, again, when we look at the functions, it is complicated, and even the best scientists haven't really determined exactly how it works, or all of its functions. But we know that it's linked to appetite and digestion, metabolism, pain, inflammation, mood, memory, our motor control, our sleep, the cardiovascular system, bones, how bones heal, how they grow, liver function, our reproductive system, skin, our stress. So all of those functions contribute to homeostasis, which refers to basically the stability of your internal environment. So that's kind of like, the basics of it, sort of. It's a little sciencey, a little geeky, but
I love science, so you're speaking my language. We can talk lipids and enzymes all day. So I love going down the rabbit hole of Google Scholar. So I love that. And I want to ask you specifically, a lot of people, they don't understand the difference between THC and CBD. So maybe you can explain that for everyone.
Yeah, sure. So again, THC is a cannabinoid that gets you high. Okay. And once that's in your body, THC will interact with the endocannabinoid system by, again, binding to those receptors, except it has that psychoactivity to it. Okay. CBD, technically CBD, so let's say somebody gets high and they're too high and they want to not be so high, CBD actually negates THC. Okay. So if you tip for someone who's smoking and you get uncomfortable and you get too high, a little bit of CBD negates the THC, brings down the psychoactivity in the body. You cannot get high from CBD. And again, CBD is just a cannabinoid. It's a different cannabinoid. THC is a cannabinoid, binds with different receptors. CBD is another cannabinoid, and it's one of the major cannabinoids found in cannabis. Like I said to you, it's a cannabidiol. That's what CBD stands for, is cannabidiol. But like I said, CBD doesn't make you high, and it doesn't cause any negative effects. Okay, so they're still on the fence of how CBD interacts with the endocannabinoid system, but they do know that it does bind to CB1 or CB2 receptors the same way THC does. It just doesn't have that psychoactive component. So I don't know. It's different. They're different, and that's really truly the main difference, is one psychoactive. And I believe that THC is one of the only psychoactive cannabinoids within the cannabis plant. I don't think any of the other cannabinoids do that or are capable of creating that ability to be high. And now the other thing is that as much as that THC can have a the psychoactivity, it's still a very potent cannabinoid. Like when you're coming to things with cancer, some people will say you take CBD first, it goes in, it opens up all of the arteries, all of the veins, and then you hit it with THC and it comes in and it just like deploys like everything. So THC definitely has its place, and for healing, it's really, really powerful. Cancer patients, there's tons and tons of stories about how Rick Simpson oil, cured cancer, or, some seizures require THC. Although, again, CBD on its own is really beneficial. And that's kind of where that whole industry started, was with Charlotte's Web, right? That little girl, they found a strain of cannabis that was really beneficial for treating her seizures. And that's really where the CBD market kind of exploded, was from them.
Wow, that's so amazing. And you really started to touch on the next question I wanted to ask you was, are there certain health conditions where CBD might be better than THC or vice versa?
So, I mean, again, yeah, like for sure, like there's some, there's different strokes for different folks, like I think for someone dealing with like cancer, I would want to be going pretty high dose with different forms of THC, even though I don't like that feeling, but if I'm fighting for my life and it's one of the most healing properties, yeah, I'm gonna do it. And there's different ways to do it. You can use THC capsule and go anally. You could do it not topically, but you can use THC, actually THC topically, for like in a burn, like as someone who got burns all over their body. There's a lot of burn units using THC topically on the skin where you're not going to get high, but the healing benefits of it is just significant. But when it comes to a full spectrum CBD, like my product, like the blend, where there's 60 medicinal terpenes, which we'll talk about in a second, is it's changing people's lives, because it's not the shit that's on the store front for $30. And I think the problem too is people have gone out, they've had a non-existent experience with CBD, and they're like, oh, CBD doesn't work. They're right away, they've written it off. But like when the market became so big and hot, everyone wanted the profit. They're like, wow, we can make so much money, it's the cannabis industry. Nobody cared again about the end game, which is the patient or the client or whatever, however you want to refer to the person who's purchasing your product. They cared about a quick let's make our money and let's balance. Whereas when we came into the space, it was like, how do we really give the client the experience that they deserve and changes their mind about how this works? And we work with some people who've been in the cannabis space for over 40 years to help us formulate what I believe is one of the best products on the market, And it's not just that. The majority of stuff on the market is an isolate because it's cheap and the profit margins are a lot higher. But an isolated cannabinoid isn't going to do what a full spectrum product, which means fully encompassing the whole plant, even if there's trace amounts of THC to create what we call the entourage effect. But the terpenes are the volatile compounds found in the sticky resin glands of the plant. And their role in nature is literally to ward off bacteria, to ward off viruses, to protect from mold, to protect from predators, to help the plants function. They're essentially the immune system of the plant. So we took 60 of those different medicinal terpenes, throw them into all of our formulas with a full spectrum CBD. We make it nano, and someone has one of my bottles for 8 weeks. I mean, shitty for business, but really good for the client. The bottles last, it's a microdose, 4 to 6 drops in the US on our US formula, and it's 3 to 5 drops in Canada. It's a microdose, and people don't believe it. They want to take more. They're like, what's 3 drops going to do? I'm like, try it, like, let's see. And the stigma too is that, like, parents, I'm like, you could give your kid CBD every day. It's really good for, they're like, I can't do that to my kid. I'm like, but you can go give your kid a shot and you can give your kid Tylenol and Advil, but you're telling me you're afraid of plant medicine? I have lots of parents who use it with their kids for so many different things, even just because they have an endocannabinoid system. Even the dogs, your cats, they have an endocannabinoid system. They're designed to receive that. And I think it makes such a big difference in so many things. And then women say to me, well, what about if I'm breastfeeding? What if I'm pregnant? I'm like, okay. If me personally, if I was pregnant, if I was breastfeeding, I'd be taking it. Maybe I wouldn't suggest to a pregnant woman who's like in her 7th month and never used it to start, because I think that's silly. But at the beginning of your pregnancy, I have women tell me that it's made such a difference who've had multiple pregnancies, like day and night. And same with breastfeeding. Women naturally produce cannabinoids when they're breastfeeding. It's so good for the baby. Like, it's so good for the baby. And the same thing with a lot of people who haven't been able to get pregnant. Just alone adding just that has helped people create a thicker lining to host, a child, or to help them get pregnant because it balances hormones. So it was interesting to come into the space and to create something that really makes a difference in people's lives. Like, really. And from that line, we've been able to expand into so many different products.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, Lesley, I love this. And when I was working in Indiana as a music therapist, I remember that I had a client who had really bad seizures. He eventually had to get the VNS surgery, and I remember it was so funny because Indiana is one of those really conservative states. They're probably not going to legalize medical marijuana for a while. And I remember their parent being like, you know what, we are trying CBD. And I remember in the case manager meeting, everyone was kind of like shifting, like, oh, but like it was impacting his seizures so much that they were like, this is working and we're going to continue to use it. And his doctor said he's okay with it. So it's really interesting how people are hesitant to give that to their children. So I want to ask you next specifically about your products in your store. And do you want to talk about some specific products that you recommend to people and what health conditions are the most ones that people come to you with, and which products you recommend?
Sure. I mean, I think everybody in the world should be on cannabis in the form of cannabinoids, CBD, the full spectrum, the terpenes. Again, just to fuel that endocannabinoid system. I would say the majority of people that come to me are in one of four categories: pain and inflammation, sleep issues, hormonal issues, whether that's menopause, hot flashes, or really bad heavy periods, and anxiety and depression. I would say those are like the four categories that the majority of clientele are coming for. When it comes to kids, it's more for focus, sleep, again, anxiety, and it also gives energy. So I tell people there's only kind of two people who shouldn't be using it. One, if you have had a organ transplant and you're on anti-rejection medications, check with your doctor because there's some contraindications. And then I tell people who are on blood thinner medication to be mindful and to get permissions, air quote, from their doctor, because it's going to do the same thing, basically, right? And I also have turmeric in my formulas. So I think the formula is really special based on those 60 medicinal terpenes, plus also things like black seed oil and turmeric and cinnamon and ginger, and the Canadians slightly different to the US, but almost the same. So that's interesting. My magnesium flakes. So magnesium is needed for over 300 enzymatic mechanisms in the body. Every single cell requires magnesium. The problem is people take the wrong magnesium. So many people get hooked on the magnesium citrate for a few reasons. One, it blows out their bowels, but citrate completely interferes and blocks the detoxification pathways. It's the wrong form. It's the cheapest form. And I think there are good forms like a neuromagnesium, but we did a transdermal magnesium, meaning you get into a bath or a foot soak, your pores open from the heat, and then you get this massive uptake of bioavailable utilized magnesium that the body wants and desires and is so thirsty for, and you get this mega hit of magnesium. And now this is magnesium chloride, not magnesium sulfate, which is Epsom salt. Okay, Epsom salt is really cheap, it's heavily marketed, it's what everybody likes to put in their bath. It really does nothing. I mean, yes, it's going to have a mild calming effect to it, but it doesn't neutralize toxins, and the body doesn't really recognize it as a utilizable mineral, whereas magnesium chloride, they do. And then we pair that with MSM, which is great for pain and inflammation, but it's also really good to help the body produce L-glutathione, which is our biggest body's antioxidants, which we need lots of. And then There's the CBD in there, there's the terpenes in there, and then we threw in some mild organic essential oils, lavender, Tahitian lime. And the experience that everyone has with this is amazing. It's so calming. It pulls out pain if you're someone in the gym training. The body requires it. So the body's like so grateful and thankful when you give that to the body. And it's calming. You know, I have parents who have very constipated kids, and they'll put them in this bath and they'll blow out it'll blow them out because you know magnesium is that important. But for pain, for sleep, you know, people, you sleep so well after you take that bath. um, so that's another one of the products. I have topicals, you know, I have a deep penetrating pain balm that's kind of like a tiger balm. We don't do any chemicals in anything. Everything's literally plants, botanicals. Like there's nothing in my products, you know. So I have a deep penetrating pain balm. I have another pain oil called Magic. I have a medicated healing balm called Soothe. All of the products have the terpenes, all of them have the CBD in them, but then it just depends on, you know, what our goal is. So that one's really good for, as much as eczema is a gut issue, you know that, I know that, and parasites and toxins, for relief topically when healing, or for those people who choose not to heal, it's really nice as it's soothed, like that's what it's called. So it's like very soothing for the skin. I use it as my lip balm. I put it on my feet, dry hands, whatever. And then I have my wellness line, which is, you know, Chondrus crispus sea moss. Again, something that became like, you know, I've been using sea moss maybe for 10 years, but Chondrus crispus sea moss is the right form. Most sea moss on the market is called the Gracilarius, and it actually strips the body of minerals, but Chondrus crispus puts back in those 92 essential minerals, and we paired it with burdock and bladderwhack, so you get your full range of amino acids. The polysaccharides act as probiotics and postbiotics and prebiotics. So that's a great product. Don't suggest that for women who are breastfeeding or pregnant. Sea moss alone is fine, but my product has the other two, one CLG and one herb. And I have fulvic and humic acid. These don't have CBD in them. They're just part of the wellness line. The fulvic and humic acid, I mean, those are your amino acids, your minerals, your electrolytes. The ability that that has is amazing. I drink that every morning on an empty stomach, and you can, you know, we'll give them links where they can go and look at it. But the last thing I have is structured colloidal silver, which is literally every home should have a bottle of that. There's nothing you can't do with colloidal silver, and especially now with, you know, viruses going around, to be able to throw that in a nebulizer, you know, to really just hit the lungs, and the sinus cavity very quickly. It's super, super beneficial. But so many uses. I mean, you can put that in any hole, any orifice. You know, you spray your eyes and your ears. People think that viruses entered the nose and the mouth. I mean, the first place they go through is the eyes and ears. So, you know, you can spray your ears, your eyes, your nose, whatever you want. You could use that to clean and disinfect things. So that's really the lineup of the store. That's what I got.
That's so amazing. You know, a few months back, I once had a friend reach out to me and she was like, Kiana, I'm thinking about using CBD, but I'm really afraid because I'm reading that it could actually cause me to fail my drug test at work. And so I'm wondering, do CBD products cause a positive drug test for employment purposes?
So here's the thing. It really depends where you're buying your CBD from. So I know that I have, you know, government officials, pilots, flight attendants, people who get regularly tested. To this day, no one's failed a test. I mean, we have, you know, our COAs, or certificate of analysis, that shows that like in the entire bottle, there's like 0.03% THC. I mean, even if you drank the whole bottle in one shot, I think it would be very difficult for that to show up. So, I mean, I can say in 5 years, nobody's tested positive with my products, but I can't say that for anybody's products, you know, but I can say that confidently with mine.
So when you know the quality of your CBD, you can ensure that you won't necessarily have a positive drug test. So I love that you cleared that up for us because I
And it depends what they're testing for. right? So if they're testing for THC, that's one thing, but there's certain companies that will actually look for CBD. But like you can have like endocannabinoids can come from fucking red peppers, like from black pepper. So like it really depends what they're looking for in the test.
Yeah, yeah. I'm really glad that you cleared that up for us because I know I'm gonna throw my mom under the bus. Sorry, mom, but she like went to the doctor and apparently the doctor was like, "Oh, do you do weed because you have THC in your system?" And my mom was like, "Oh, I've been eating them CBD gummies or something." And I was like, "Oh my god, that is too funny." And so, but the doctor was fine with it after she told her that. But it was just such a hoot because she was like, whoops, I failed my drug test because I was eating CBD gummies. And we got the biggest laugh about it. And
Yeah.
so, you told us that you felt like the best candidates for your products were people with hormonal issues, people with chronic pain and inflammation issues, people who are dealing with anxiety, depression, sleep. But is there anyone else that you would recommend your products for?
I mean, kids, adults, seniors, like really again, you have the endocannabinoid system.
Everybody.
You want to be fueling it, but it's, you know what, just to back up for 1 second, you talked about the gummies. Okay. So the gummies have become like a huge piece of this market. You're losing 90% of the medicinal benefits you want from the gummies, not without even thinking about all the garbage that's in them, the sugar, the high fructose corn syrup, and who knows what they put in them. I get that it's like novelty and it can be fun, for people if you want the way that enters the bloodstream and it stays in the body for so long. Some people love that. Like people live for that. Me, that is not my jam. But yeah, so I just wanted to touch on that. But realistically, everyone should be on it. And if someone's not sure or they have, any questions, I make it a priority in my business to be extremely available for people to reach out and ask questions about any of my products or services. I always want people to feel comfortable with their purchase.
I love that. And I just love you. You're so real and so authentic and you really just come to serve people with your knowledge and your willingness to help. And so I commend you on your cannabis journey of really breaking down the stigma and getting people back centered into like plant medicine and eating plant-based diets. I know that that's also something that you're super passionate about as well. And so I wanted to ask you how would you recommend that people facilitate these conversations with their physicians when they're interested on maybe utilizing CBD, or even in some states here in the US, like here in Virginia, medical marijuana is available, and it's no longer illegal to utilize marijuana in the state of Virginia. I can't say that about all 50 states in the US, but in Virginia, we do have medical cards available to us and CBD products and all these things available to us in stores. So I'm wondering, how would you recommend someone ask their doctor, how can they advocate for the use of CBD or even medical marijuana?
So I think the tricky part too, it comes down to is that again, these doctors are not trained in this space, right? So they either have a personal like offensiveness, like they're offended by it, or they don't understand it to guide their patients properly with the use of 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 using it, right? They don't they're just not educated on it. They're not taught about the endocannabinoid system in medical school. No way. So, that makes it really tricky in itself. So I think the best thing is for somebody, first of all, CBD is legal in all states. Okay. So that's for sure. I know marijuana is not legalized or for recreational use in the majority of the states, but I think that's going to change. So I think the conversation is more the patient to take the lead and say, listen, I'm adding this to my wellness routine. Do you have any concerns? Let the doctor feel authoritative in their position to give their concerns. And it's more of just allowing the patient, if open communication is important to the patient between physician, to let them know that this is something that they're starting. This is something they're adding. It's not like you need permission, you know? Um, and some doctors might be some doctors might take it upon themselves to be doing the training and to be doing the learning and to really wanting to be able to understand that and work that into patient care.
That's so wonderful. I'll be honest with you. Actually, a year ago today, I was in the ER because I was having some stuff going on with my chest, and I found out that I have tachycardia and a heart spasm. But I was in the hospital, and I remember there was this man like out because he didn't have like a room. He was like out in the hallway on a stretcher, and I was like in my little ER room, and I could hear everything. And apparently, this guy needed his gallbladder out. Like there was no HIPAA, and like the surgeon like comes up. And he's like asking him all these questions. And the surgeon, in the same breath, he's like, man, you got to quit smoking. Like, smoking's bad. You got to stop doing that. Blah, 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 blah. And then, mind you, today's date is 4/19. So they were like, we're going to do your gallbladder surgery tomorrow. And then, and then he was like, oh, no, you're going to be in the hospital getting your gallbladder out on 4/20. And then he was like, that's okay, man. When I get out of here, I'm going to blaze up. And the doctor was like, yeah, blaze up. And I was like, he just told him to stop smoking, but told him to blaze up all in the same conversation. And I was like, it just brought me so much, because when you're in the hospital for hours, the smallest things bring me joy. But I remember that, and I just thought that was the funniest thing I ever overheard in my life. And so, like, stop smoking, but make sure you blaze up tomorrow after you gallbladder surgery. So I thought that was the most hilarious thing ever. So I wanted to ask you if you had any last thoughts or any ways that we can advocate together for the use of CBD, for the use of hemp plants and marijuana plants for the sake of healing.
Listen, I think it's like I say, when I work with a client and they're like, well, what do I need? I'm like, well, you for sure need to start CBD regardless. And it's not just because I sell it. I know that it starts to make such a difference in symptoms while we work on root cause healing. So I think if you have kids, if you exist in this world, the fact that it's very beneficial on stress, right? Lowering stress, bringing down stress. I think it's just something that should be in everyone's repertoire. And the thing with cannabis is, with CBD oil, it's not designed to be used situationally. It's designed to be given a dose every single day. Okay. And you look at most of the products on the market, you'll see they're like half dropper fulls, a full dropper full, a quarter of a dropper. Mine, I'm talking a couple drops, twice a day max. Some people want it 3 times a day. I mean, you're not going to overdose. The only thing you can do is overstimulate the endocannabinoid system, which is not really a big deal. But I think it's something that once you start to understand, and I encourage people to research the endocannabinoid system, like learn about it, and then it's kind of like a no-brainer, It really is. And when you look at the studies that show, endocannabinoid deficiency, like fibromyalgia, like we spoke about before, I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer. Like, it's something so simple and easy to add, to your life. I think 2 things that I think are so important is, 1, the endocannabinoid system, and 2, cleaning the bodies of toxins and parasites. Because those 3 things are such underlying issues of so many things that could so easily be resolved if humans weren't so stubborn.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Lesley, you are just an absolute fresh breath of air. It was so amazing having you here. And I'm sorry that the world wasn't able to see your beautiful face. We got to feel your beautiful soul shine through your voice, as she really helped us understand, like, how to use CBD. Where can we get a quality product from, and who's the best people for this particular product. So, and that answers everybody, because everybody has an endocannabinol system. So definitely everyone check out the description of this video. You can see more about Lesley, how to work with Lesley, and grab some products from her store. So if you're on Facebook, the description's in the top. If you're on YouTube, the description's in the bottom. And make sure that you go ahead and head over to, it's called the Holistic Health Genius store, right?
Yeah, and they can use coupon code THANK-YOU10 for a discount.
Amazing. Thank you, Lesley. And I want to thank everybody and all the listeners for tuning in to Nature's Divine Healing on Demand. Please be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel, because I'll be bringing back more powerful individuals with a wealth of knowledge, more natural remedy videos for you all to use the things around you that the good earth gave us to be able to heal our bodies. So I just want to say thank you. And until next time.
Thanks for having me.
Yes.